I'm the most useless kid in Ashbourne. While my sister Dawn was securing that multibillion-euro chip deal in Europe, I was up in the attic glasshouse, fiddling with my plants that nobody cared about. At Father's birthday banquet, my sister, as the group's heir, held his arm and basked in the most fervent admiration and envy of the entire room. Under the spotlight, she was a dazzling diamond by nature. And I, standing in the shadowed corner, am just a piece of rubble unworthy of even having my name remembered by the guests. Someone holding a champagne glass raised it slightly toward me, their face wearing a polite yet distant look of inquiry. "And this young lady is?" Before I could answer, Mrs. Zhang beside me smiled and stepped in to save the situation. "A distant relative of Victor's, probably here to see how the world works." Her voice was just loud enough for me to hear clearly. I became the joke that Ashbourne had laughed at for 20 years. My mother, once a top socialite in Hong Kong, married my father, business tycoon Victor. A powerful union that gave birth to my sister, Dawn. The name Dawn was given by my grandfather, symbolizing Genesis, hope, and the beautiful prologue of all things. And she truly lived up to expectations. At 3, she could recite poetry fluently. At 7, she performed at Vienna's Golden Hall. At 15, she entered Wharton Business School. By 22, she returned home, and her first investment brought the company 9-figure profits. She was the perfect, impeccable heir. So, when my mom unexpectedly became pregnant with me, everyone thought it was the icing on the cake. Dawn is so outstanding, the next child is bound to be exceptional too. But I let all of them down. I don't have my sister's photographic memory, nor her decisive business acumen. Numbers don't come naturally to me. I'm allergic to cocktail parties, and I loathe all social occasions that require wearing a mask of fake smiles. My name is Gemma. Dawn, Gemma. See? Even the names seem like a carefully crafted irony, one rising, the other fading quietly. My parents are respectable people. They pride themselves on being open-minded parents and never admit to favoritism. But actions speak louder than words. On family outings, my father's right hand is always reserved for my mother, and his left hand always holds my sister's. I can only follow behind them, like an insignificant little tag-along. At my sister's 25th birthday party, also a celebration banquet for her official designation as the sole heir of the corporation, my father, drunk, slung his arm around a business associate's shoulder and pointed at Dawn, radiant under the lights, his face brimming with pride. "This is my daughter, the proudest masterpiece of my life." A friend flattered, "Victor, you're so fortunate, but don't you also have a younger daughter?" The smile on my father's face faded slightly as he waved his hand, with a hint of barely noticeable regret and lingering annoyance. "Don't even mention it, if only we'd just had Dawn from the start. Unfortunately, there's also Gemma." The entire room fell silent for a moment. Standing in the crowd, I felt as if I had been stripped naked and thrown into the snow. Later, my father must have sobered up, realizing his slip of the tongue, and unusually called me into his study. "Gemma, don't take it to heart. Dad had too much to drink." He handed me a black card with no spending limit. What Dad meant was that Dawn can already hold her own, and I'm very pleased. "But you still give us so much to worry about." The burden on Dad's shoulders remains heavy. You see, even the apologies of the wealthy come with a condescending air of charity. I lowered my eyes and took the icy card. "I understand, Dad. It wasn't intentional." He was just finally speaking the truth he'd suppressed for 20 years. When I was 18, my sister brought her fiancé Vincent home. The Harringtons were true aristocracy in the capital's elite circles, and Vincent was the most celebrated leader among the younger generation. His union with Dawn was hailed as the marriage of kings. That day, due to severe pollen allergies, I locked myself in my room and informed the butler in advance to take leave. So when Vincent was being shown around the mansion by my sister, and they pushed open my door, everyone froze. My sister frowned, her tone tinged with impatience. "Gemma, why are you at home?" Clearly, no one had informed me about such an important guest coming today. Nor had anyone remembered that their daughter also lived in this house. Vincent stood at the door, his gaze passing over my sister and settling on me. He wore a well-tailored gray suit, exuding an aloof and elegant demeanor, yet his eyes were gentle. He showed no trace of surprise, merely giving a slight nod. "Hello, I'm Vincent." Embarrassed, I sat up from the bed, still wearing my old pilled pajamas, my face flushed red from allergies. Beside him stood his sister, dressed in a custom Chanel suit, with flawless makeup, radiant and glowing. I felt so disheveled I wanted to crawl into a hole. "She's my sister, Gemma." My sister's introduction was brief, even reluctant, as if presenting some less than glorious appendage. "She's in poor health, stays at home all day, and didn't want to disturb you, so she didn't come down." My mom quickly chimed in with a smile. "Gemma and Vincent have such fate to meet like this." My muttered "I'm not feeling well" was abruptly cut off. I had no choice but to sit stiffly next to the elegant and poised Dawn, my allergic reaction clearly visible on my face. I didn't need a mirror to know how cruel the comparison was. While Vincent was away answering the phone, I whispered to my mom, "Mom, my allergies are really bad, I'm having trouble breathing. Can we call the family doctor to come over?" My mother glared at me and lowered her voice. "Don't make trouble now. It's your brother-in-law's first visit, such an important occasion. Can't you be a little more sensible?" I bit my lip. "Then can I at least go rest in my room?" "You're sitting without any posture, what kind of impression is that? Do you want Harrington to think we Ashbournes have no manners?" That meal felt like sitting on pins and needles. Vincent was a true gentleman, with upbringing ingrained in his bones. Even though the conversation revolved around business and finance, he still managed to spare a fraction of his attention for me. "Miss Gemma's room is quite special," he suddenly spoke up, with a very unique fragrance. Everyone at the table fell silent. My sister let out a laugh, her tone laced with disdain. "Gemma is always into these useless things. All those little bottles and jars give me a headache just looking at them." My father shook his head in agreement. "A girl should learn something useful. Like finance, or management." That was the first time I defended myself in front of my family. "It's not just any ordinary fragrance," I said softly. "It's a scent I blended myself. The top notes are galbanum, the heart notes are iris and lily of the valley, and the base notes are oak moss. I named it Grain Rain." A flicker of surprise crossed Vincent's eyes, quickly replaced by genuine admiration. "Grain Rain, what a beautiful name. Cool yet brimming with moist greenery, truly reminiscent of a post-rain valley. You're quite talented." For the first time in 20 years, someone acknowledged my uselessness. At that moment, my heart felt as if a small pebble had been tossed into it, sending ripples that wouldn't cease. After dinner, Vincent prepared to leave, and my sister went to the garage to get the car. Vincent approached me and handed over a small, dainty gift box. A small token for our first meeting, hardly a token of respect. Everyone assumed it was some valuable jewelry. My sister glanced at it, the corner of her mouth curling into an almost imperceptible sneer. I returned to my room and opened the gift box. Inside weren't luxury items, but a complete set of professional perfumery tools and several bottles of rare essential oils. One of them was the Gros May rose, which I had searched for a long time without success. There was also a card, handwritten by Vincent, his script elegant and strong. "To the future master perfumer." Clutching that card, my eyes grew hot, and I nearly shed tears. My sister pushed the door open and came in, her expression turning quite vivid when she saw the set of tools. "Vincent really has too much time on his hands, gifting you such childish playthings." She picked up the bottle of May Rose Absolute, brought it to her nose for a sniff, then immediately wrinkled her brow in distaste. "I thought Vincent had better taste. Turns out even he can be fooled by such tacky little tricks." She tossed the bottle carelessly onto my dressing table. "Gemma, you'd better know your place. Don't think just because Vincent gave you a compliment, you can climb the social ladder. In Ashbourne, in Harrington, even in the entire upper class, your little hobby isn't even worthy of being a joke." I silently picked up the essential oil bottle and carefully placed it back in its box. A voice inside me whispered, at least he sees me more than you, his own sister. Vincent's gift became the only light in my bleak life. I began studying perfumery more systematically, spending days and nights immersed in my glass greenhouse. I created summer solstice, white dew, frost's descent. I named my creations after the 24 solar terms. That was my only way of resisting this cold, aristocratic family. My allergies gradually improved, and I became a bit more cheerful. I cut off the heavy bangs I used to hide my low self-esteem, revealing a smooth forehead. Though my features were far less striking than my sister's, at least I could smile at my reflection in the mirror. My mom is a godmother-level figure in the fashion industry. Normally, even if my sister changed her lipstick shade, she could accurately identify whether it was Armani or Christian Louboutin, even discussing how different application techniques could alter one's aura. But my new hairstyle went unnoticed for an entire week. I still refused to give up. During a family dinner, I took the initiative to ask, "Mom, do you notice anything different about me today?" My mother looked up from her financial magazine, her eyes sweeping over my face before she waved me away impatiently, as if shooing a fly. "Your sister is having some trouble with her project in Europe, and I'm already stressed. Don't bother me." At that moment, all my desire to share vanished. From that day on, I never again took the initiative to tell them anything about myself. Even when I won the newcomer award at an international perfumery competition, I didn't mention it unless they asked. Perhaps my quiet and unobtrusive demeanor finally gave them peace of mind. On my 20th birthday, my father gave me a sum of money and a villa with a garden in the suburbs. He called it a coming-of-age gift. In reality, I knew it was a declaration that I had been thoroughly and gracefully exiled. My mother spoke very tactfully when she talked to me. "Gemma, you've grown up now, and you should have your own space. With all the comings and goings at home, and everyone always discussing work, it must be disturbing for you. Moving out will give you some peace. Your sister will soon be engaged to Vincent, and the house will undergo renovations. It's going to be chaotic, and with your poor health, we wouldn't want you to have another allergic reaction." Every word was said for my benefit. Every word was telling me that there was no longer a place for me in this home. I remained silent for a long time, then calmly accepted it. On the day of the move, my sister was there too. She was dressed in sleek riding attire, having just returned from the stables, with a riding crop still in hand. Leaning against the doorframe, she watched as I directed the movers to handle the jars and bottles, her eyes filled with disdain. "Fine, move out. At least it'll keep the house from being polluted by your mess." She paused, then tapped the tip of her whip against one of my crates filled with spices. "Gemma, do you know the difference between you and me?" Without waiting for my answer, she continued on her own. "What I create adds value, enough to double Ashbourne's market worth. And what you create?" She let out a light laugh. "Just a bunch of worthless, fleeting cents. Try to understand the family's decision. We can't afford to keep someone useless." I froze in place, my fingers curling into fists. I understood the family. But who would understand me? Yet I didn't voice my question. I knew no one in this family wanted to hear it, nor would they listen. The home I'd lived in for 20 years had now completely erased my name. I moved into that villa, spending my days among flowers and spices. I thought my life would settle into quietude from then on, until my sister Dawn and Vincent's engagement banquet. I received an invitation, exquisitely crafted, with the gilded words Dawn Vincent printed on it. My name wasn't there. I was just an ordinary guest. My mother called me specifically to remind me, "Gemma, it's your sister's big day. Dress appropriately, don't be too flashy, but don't look shabby either. Just sit there quietly and don't embarrass your sister." I understood what she meant. My very existence was, in itself, an embarrassment. The engagement banquet was held at a 7-star hotel under the Ashbourne brand, with the entire Sky Garden reserved for the event. I didn't have any decent formal wear. My sister, on the other hand, had an entire walk-in closet filled with luxurious designer dresses, but I didn't want to borrow any. I used the prize money I won from a competition to buy a simple lavender maxi dress. When I arrived at the banquet, the moment I saw my sister, I couldn't help but feel utterly inadequate. She was wearing a handcrafted, custom-made starry sky gown by a Lebanese designer, adorned with tens of thousands of tiny diamonds that shimmered under the lights like an angel descended from the Milky Way. Her curvaceous figure was accentuated to perfection, and her face bore a queenly smile, radiating confidence and poise. I had always felt as insignificant as dust in the shadow of my dazzling older sister. But at that moment, the sense of inferiority nearly consumed me. I tightened my grip on my clutch, as if that could help me hold on to the last shred of my dignity. I found a corner to sit in, desperately trying to make myself invisible. Yet Vincent still spotted me. He weaved through the crowd of clinking glasses and approached me. "You look beautiful today," he said with genuine admiration. "Thank you," I replied with an awkward smile. "Congratulations to you and my sister." His gaze lingered on me for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but it ultimately dissolved into a soft sigh. The banquet reached its climax as my father and sister took the stage together to deliver their speech. "My greatest pride in this life, Victor, is having a daughter like Dawn. She is my sole heir and the only future leader of Ashbourne." The audience erupted in thunderous applause. I watched my radiant father and dazzling sister on stage. There was no place for me beside them. In their blueprint for the future, I did not exist. Standing numbly before the bathroom mirror, I sorrowfully wondered, for an ordinary girl, is having an exceptionally brilliant sister a blessing or a curse? Suddenly, a wild thought emerged as if possessed. If I must forever dwell in the shadows, then let the shadows bloom with their own unique hue. If they can only see my sister, then I'll stand right beside her. In my own way. I took a deep breath and turned to leave. I returned to the banquet hall and walked straight to the main table. All eyes were focused on the stage, no one noticed my little interruption. I approached Vincent's seat, leaned down, and whispered in his ear. "Vincent, may I have a word with you in private? I prepared an engagement gift that I'd like to give separately, to you and my sister." A flicker of surprise crossed Vincent's eyes, but he nodded politely and followed me to a secluded corner of the terrace. I took out a minimalist white porcelain bottle from my handbag, completely unmarked. "This is the engagement gift I blended for you." I uncorked the bottle, and an exotic, indescribable fragrance instantly filled the air. Being a connoisseur of scents, Vincent closed his eyes to carefully analyze it. "There's rose in this, but not ordinary rose. And tuberose and jasmine?" His brows furrowed slightly, but their aromas are overpowered by something stronger, more piercing. "What is this?" I looked at him and said word by word, "This is datura." Vincent's face changed. I chuckled softly, the laughter carrying 20 years of coldness and sorrow. I named it Accomplice. Top notes: the May rose from Grasse, Egyptian jasmine, and Indian tuberose, the three most exquisite, expensive, and beautiful floral scents in the world, symbolizing my sister, Dawn. She possessed everything, she was perfect. For the middle notes, I've used a generous amount of white musk and ambergris to create a warm, enveloping skin-like texture, like an embrace. This symbolizes you, Mr. Vincent. Your presence is the most magnificent coronation in her perfect life. Vincent's gaze deepened as he listened quietly without interrupting me. But, my tone shifted sharply, growing colder. Do you detect it? Beneath this ultimate romance and beauty lies a chilling, toxic scent. That is the base note, black datura. It represents all the things hidden by perfection, everything that cannot bear the light. Such as an unwanted life, cries repeatedly ignored, an existence forever denied a name. I raised my eyes and met Vincent's trembling gaze. "This perfume is for you. When you're immersed in the pinnacle of love and career, will you ever catch a whiff of the faint scent of resentment rising from the shadows? Congratulations, Vincent. You're about to take away the light of Ashbourne. From now on, you'll have to learn how to live with the shadows that follow that radiance, for a long, long time." With that, I pressed the small porcelain bottle into his cold hand and turned away, striding toward the exit without a backward glance. I didn't look back to see Vincent's expression, nor did I glance at my dazzling parents and sister on the stage. From this day forward, I was no longer the awkward footnote in their perfect family. I am Gemma, the poison-named accomplice, and the sole protagonist of my own life. The moment I stepped out of the hotel entrance, the evening breeze lifted my long hair, and I felt an unprecedented sense of relief. I took out my phone and dialed the number for the organizing committee of the International Fragrance Competition. "Hello, I've decided to accept your invitation to serve as a special judge for the next competition." Yes, that award notification I had hidden away, the one they looked down on, the hobby they deemed worthless, would become my sharpest weapon against this world. The prologue that belonged to Gemini would truly begin tonight. I blocked all my family's phone numbers. But I forgot to block my mother's personal assistant. At 3 a.m, the assistant's phone rang like a death knell. I answered, and my mother's voice, barely restrained from hysteria, came through. "Gemma, have you lost your mind? Do you have any idea what you've done today?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, listening calmly to her sharp accusations. "Your sister's engagement party. The Harrington family's reputation. The Ashbourne's face. All ruined by you alone. How could you, how dare you do something so disgraceful? Sending such inauspicious gifts, saying such sarcastic things. Do you think we Ashbournes have been too kind to you, making you forget your place?" I remained silent. My silence seemed to infuriate her even more. "You come back here right now. Apologize to Harrington and your sister. Now. Immediately." "I'm not coming back," I said softly, my voice devoid of any emotion. "What did you say?" She probably thought she'd misheard. "I said, I'm not going back." I repeated, "From the day I moved out, I never thought about going back. That home belongs to my sister, not me." Dead silence filled the other end of the line. After a long pause, my mother's voice came through, weary and icy. "Gemma, you'll regret this." The call ended abruptly. Almost immediately, an unknown number called. It was my father. His voice was much calmer than my mother's, but the chilling pressure in his tone practically pierced through the receiver. "Here are 2 options for you. First, delete all your messy social media accounts, spend a few years abroad, and stay out of family affairs. Once the situation settles, I'll arrange a marriage for you, guaranteeing you'll never want for anything for the rest of your life. Second," he paused, his tone laced with absolute authority and an unshakable finality. "I'll take back the villa and cards I gave you, cut off all your financial support. You're no longer my daughter. Go out into the world and crash headfirst into reality, see if your so-called hobbies can even put a meal on your table. This is the final ultimatum. It's also the familiar threat I've heard for 20 years. In the past, I would always tremble with fear and obediently comply every time. But this time I smiled. "Dad," I said, "actually, from the very beginning, I only ever had one choice. That is, to be myself." With that, I hung up the phone and turned it off. The world is quiet. I lie in bed, gazing at the ink-black sky outside the window, my heart pounding violently in my chest. Half of it is lingering fear, half of it is a newborn-like excitement. As dawn approached, the phone powered on, and a message popped up. From Vincent. I received the perfume, but the name accomplice isn't very good. I thought he was going to confront me on my sister's behalf. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure how to reply. A few seconds later, the second message arrived. "It belongs to you alone and should not involve anyone else. It should be called soliloquy." My eyes welled up with tears at that moment. Soliloquy. Yes, it was my grand yet sorrowful soliloquy, unheard for 20 long years. Vincent was the first and only one who understood it. My father acted faster and more ruthlessly than I had imagined. The next day, my bank card was frozen, and the villa's ownership was forcibly reclaimed under the pretext of unfulfilled gift obligations. I was escorted out by several bodyguards in black suits, only allowed to take a few changes of clothes and my fragrance-blending bottles and jars. I stood at the entrance of what was once my villa, like a stray dog kicked out onto the streets. My lofty father was using the simplest and crudest way to tell me, without Ashbourne, you are nothing. With the few $100s in cash I had left on me, I rented the cheapest apartment in the city. The room was so small that I could barely fit my precious essential oils and equipment. But this tiny, personal space of mine gave me an unprecedented sense of peace. Shortly after, I received an email from the International Perfumery Competition Committee. They regretfully informed me that, due to certain suggestions received from partners, they had no choice but to retract my invitation to be a judge. Partner. Anyone could guess with their toes that it's Ashbourne's doing. They're cutting off all my paths, pushing me to the brink, forcing me to go back and beg on my knees. Sitting among those boxes, breathing in the mixed scent of spices in the air, I felt for the first time the bone-chilling cold and the harshness of reality. Turns out, without the title of second Miss Ashbourne, I really am nothing. Even the chance to prove myself depends on others' whims. Just as I was about to lose hope, my phone rang. It was Vincent. Are you free to meet? I'm outside your apartment. I froze. How did he know I was here? I rushed to the window and saw a sleek black Bentley parked downstairs. Vincent was leaning against the car, looking up just as he spotted me and gave a slight nod. We met at the cafe downstairs. I'm sorry, he got straight to the point, it was my oversight regarding the judge situation. Not your fault, I shook my head. I was being naive. My father, that's just how they are. They can't tolerate anything slipping out of their control. Vincent looked at me with a deep gaze. So, are you planning to give up? I raised my head and met his eyes. In his pupils, I saw my own reflection, tiny, disheveled, yet stubborn. No, I said. The more they want me to quit, the more I can't give in. He seemed to have expected my answer, as a faint smile curled at the corner of his lips. I know an independent perfumer from France who has connections to a private fragrance salon, unaffiliated with any commercial conglomerate. He's currently searching for a perfume that embodies the Zen essence of the East for the salon. Your grain rain, white dew, and frost's descent all carry profound artistic conception. Perhaps you could give it a try. He slid a business card in front of me. His name is Jean-Pierre, a bit eccentric, judges only the work, not the background. I looked at the card, then back at him. Why are you helping me? Vincent was silent for a moment, then took a sip of coffee. Perhaps, he set the cup down and gazed out the window, I just genuinely want to know what a perfume called soliloquy smells like. Or maybe, his voice dropped low, almost a whisper, I simply don't want a future master perfumer to fade into obscurity. I clenched the business card in my hand. This was my final chance. I shut myself in that tiny apartment, studying Jean-Pierre's demands day and night. Oriental, Zen essence. It was an extremely abstract concept. I scrapped countless drafts. Incense, sandalwood, agarwood, these elements were too concrete, too superficial. I wanted a deeper expression. I spent my last penny on a high-quality ink stick and a sheet of rice paper. I ground the ink quietly, like a scholar of ancient times. The air gradually filled with the bitter fragrance of ink, mingled with the unique scent of pine oil. At that moment, inspiration struck. What is Zen? It is the dry landscape, the blank space, the stubborn vitality in absolute silence. It is restraint, it is integrity, the outward desolation and inward abundance. I started immediately. I used the finest pine soot ink as the core, paired with icy cedar and slightly bitter patchouli, creating a cold and lofty scholarly aura. To break this silence, I added a hint of orris root to the heart notes, a note notoriously difficult to master, carrying the earthy tang and root-like sensation of a plant. It was like tenacious life taking root in a barren expanse of snow. At last, I used a minuscule, almost imperceptible trace of ambergris to leave a faint, elusive warmth in the base notes. Like a speck of vermilion between the brows of a high monk, a touch of compassion, the final resting place of Zen. I named it Stillness. I packaged the sample along with my conceptual notes and sent them via international courier to Jean-Pierre. Then began the long, agonizing wait. During that time, I barely scraped by, eking out a meager living by writing fragrance reviews for small beauty bloggers. One day, I came across an online interview with my sister, Dawn. As the Young Entrepreneur of the Year, she graced the cover of the country's top-tier financial magazine. The reporter asked her, "Ms. Dawn, it's said that the Ashbourne Group is planning to enter the high-end fragrance market. Could you share some details?" My sister smiled elegantly and confidently at the camera. "Yes. I believe scent is also a form of power. We've already assembled a world-class perfumery team and will leverage cutting-edge AI technology and big data analysis to precisely tailor the most effective and sought-after success scent for our clients. Our first flagship product will be named The Crown. Its fragrance embodies the essence of power and victory." I stared at my radiant sister on the screen, my heart a mix of conflicting emotions. She was always like this, effortlessly reducing everything to commercial value and symbols of power. Even scents were not spared. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was an email from France. From Jean-Pierre. The email was brief, just one sentence: "Mademoiselle Gemma, bienvenue dans le monde de la haute parfumerie." At that moment, I cried. My Stillness, launched at Jean-Pierre's private salon, had caused a sensation in Europe's fragrance circles. The critics, accustomed to all manner of luxurious scents, were utterly conquered by this minimalist, restrained, and deeply introspective fragrance imbued with Eastern philosophy. They hailed it as a poem written for the soul. Without any commercial promotion, Stillness became a rare and sought-after masterpiece solely by word of mouth. Soon, top international luxury conglomerates extended olive branches, hoping to acquire the formula for Stillness or to invite me as their brand's chief perfumer. I declined them all. With the first earnings from Stillness, I rented a small storefront on a quiet old street and founded my own independent perfume atelier. I named it Atelier Fin. On the opening day, there was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no guests, only me. I blended a bottle of fragrance for myself, using neroli, bergamot, and white tea. Fresh and bright, I named it Genesis. The studio's business turned out better than I had imagined. Many came seeking the famed Stillness, but I limited its supply each month. Because I knew that once art became an assembly line product, it would lose its soul. Finally, my life settled into a stable rhythm, tranquil yet fulfilling. I had thought my entanglement with Ashbourne would end there. That was until the day my sister Dawn appeared at the doorstep of my studio, arm in arm with Vincent. She was dressed in a meticulously tailored white suit, towering on 10-centimeter heels, her makeup flawless and her presence commanding, utterly out of place in my small, humble shop. She moved through the space like a queen surveying her territory, casting a critical eye over every corner of my shop. "Gemma, you've really made something of yourself," she began, her tone laced with the familiar, biting superiority. "Opening this little dump in such a backwater, how does it feel? Must be so fulfilling, right?" I ignored her, my gaze settling on Vincent beside her. He wore a dark gray cashmere coat today, looking somewhat weary, yet his eyes remained gentle as they met mine. "Gemma, congratulations," he said to me. "Did you come here for something?" I asked coolly. My sister snorted, pulling a gilded invitation from her Hermès Birkin bag and tossing it onto my workbench. "The launch event for Queen, the premium fragrance brand under the Ashbourne Group, is next Wednesday." She lifted her chin like a proud peacock. "Our flagship product, The Crown, features 2 Nobel Prize-winning chemists as consultants and utilizes the world's most advanced synthetic fragrance technology. It can precisely replicate the scent of dopamine released by the human brain when experiencing feelings of power and victory." "Oh, by the way," she added, as if suddenly remembering something, a wicked smile curling at the corner of her lips. "The venue for the launch is the same hotel where I held my engagement party, the Sky Garden. You still remember the way, don't you? Gemma, I want you to witness firsthand what it truly means to build a career, what it means to create something worthy of the spotlight." Those little bottles and jars you play house with would crumble instantly against absolute capital and technology. I looked at the invitation, then at her. Suddenly, I felt a pang of pity for her. Even now, she was still using her own yardstick to measure me, still trying to crush me. I calmly accepted the invitation. All right, I'll come. I was determined to see just how far a perfume built with money and power could go. The launch event for Ashbourne Queen was orchestrated by my sister like a coronation ceremony. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and a sea of glamorous figures. The air was thick with an intense, metallic scent that felt almost aggressive. That is the crown. It indeed smells like success. Like freshly printed banknotes, blended with expensive leather and the chill of champagne bubbles. It's precise, powerful, and unapologetically ambitious, just like my sister herself. I stood quietly in the corner, wearing a simple black dress, like an outcast at a grand feast. I didn't wear stillness. Today, I wore the very first, the only one, soliloquy. It carries 20 years of my pent-up frustration, unwillingness, resentment, and the desperate resolve of burning my boats. This is my story, my declaration of war. My sister Dawn, in a dazzling red gown, stood at the center of the stage, radiant. Scent is the most efficient social calling card, and the most intangible badge of power. She held the microphone, her voice brimming with the confidence of someone in complete control. The crown is not a perfume. It's a declaration, a weapon. It will make you the absolute protagonist the moment you step into any room. Thunderous applause erupted from the audience. I saw my parents seated in the front row, their faces radiating undisguised pride and satisfaction. My sister's gaze swept across the crowd before finally, precisely, settling on me. She flashed a victor's smile my way, silently mouthing the words, "You lost." It was then that a voice spoke up beside me. What an utterly suffocating scent. I turned to see a white-haired French gentleman wrinkling his nose in discomfort, clearly unimpressed. I recognized him instantly. Roland Duchamp, the world's most authoritative perfume critic, notorious for his sharp tongue and exacting standards. What was he doing here? He seemed to notice me, or rather, the scent on me. He leaned in a little closer, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Cedar, orris root, and ink? His eyes flew open, filled with incredulous delight. Good heavens, this scent, it's like a melancholic narrative poem, telling a story. Whose creation is this? All eyes were on the stage, and no one noticed the hushed conversation in this corner. Just as I was about to speak, Vincent appeared beside us, seemingly out of nowhere. He gave me a faint smile, then said to Monsieur Roland Duchamp, "Monsieur Roland Duchamp, allow me to introduce you. This is Miss Gemma, the creator of Soliloquy." My sister's smile on stage froze instantly. The appearance of Roland Duchamp was like a stone thrown into a calm lake, instantly stirring up countless ripples. He completely ignored my sister's grandiloquent speech on stage about AI big data and dopamine simulation. Instead, he pulled me aside, discussing the structure of soliloquy with the excitement of someone who had discovered a new continent. That barely detectable animalic note in the bass, is it ambergris? No, it's warmer, closer to the skin. He looked at me excitedly. "Mademoiselle, you're a genius. You're writing poetry with sense." The surrounding guests, especially those media and buyers who truly understood perfumery, gradually turned their attention toward our commotion. They caught the scent of soliloquy on me. Compared to the domineering, singular, and forcibly imposed power aroma of the crown in the hall, the complexity, layered richness, and storytelling quality of soliloquy were like a clear spring, instantly capturing everyone's noses and souls. One person, then two, and soon more and more people gathered around. They began murmuring in hushed tones. "This scent is so unique, so tranquil, yet the afterglow is incredibly powerful." Exactly. The crown gives you a headache after a while, but this one makes you want to cry. Now this is true perfumery art. The spotlight on the stage was still shining, but below the stage, I became the new center of attention. Dawn's face gradually turned deathly pale. Her meticulously planned coronation ceremony, her proud the crown, turned into a colossal, hollow joke in the face of my soliloquy. She finally lost control. She rushed off the stage, pushing through the crowd, glaring at me with bloodshot eyes. "Gemma. You did this on purpose. You just wanted to ruin everything." I looked at her calmly. "Sister, didn't you say you wanted to show me what it truly means to build a career?" I glanced around. All those guests who had once flocked to her were now eyeing us sisters with probing and amused gazes. "See? Everyone's here," I said. "Isn't this the perfect stage?" She trembled with rage. Vincent stepped forward, subtly shielding me behind him. He said to Dawn, "Dawn, the essence of business is the product. Yours failed to convince the consumers." "Vincent. Whose side are you on?" My sister completely broke down. "Don't forget, you're my fiancé." Not a ripple of emotion crossed Vincent's face. He took a velvet box from his suit pocket, opened it in front of everyone, then slowly closed it again. Inside was a dazzling diamond ring. "Our engagement was always just a business alliance between two companies," he said to my sister, his tone so calm it was almost cruel. "But Ashbourne Group and your way of doing things have made me seriously question the prospects of this alliance. A corporation that tries to suffocate true artists, a family that can't even tolerate its own members." He paused, then turned his gaze to me, his eyes filled with a tenderness and resolve I'd never seen before. "I don't believe it can create anything truly great. So, the engagement is cancelled." After speaking, he placed the box back into my sister's hands, and then, under the stunned gazes of everyone present, took hold of mine. "Let's go." My sister stared blankly at the ring box in her hand, then at our clasped hands, and finally at the outright pity and mockery on the faces of the guests. The crown, built with money and power, crumbled to pieces in that moment. I followed Vincent out of the banquet hall, behind us the furious and bewildered shouts of my parents and my sister's unrestrained, hysterical sobs. I didn't look back once. That press conference became the biggest joke in the industry. Ashbourne's Queen brand faltered before it could even take off, its stock prices plummeting. I heard my sister was stripped of all her positions by the board and sent abroad to recuperate. And my soliloquy was written into Roland Duchamp's annual fragrance review column under the title, "Silent Poetry and Noisy Shells." My studio, Gemma, became an overnight sensation. Orders flew in like snowflakes, but I still maintained my own pace, limited editions, custom creations, preserving the soul of each bottle of perfume. One sunny afternoon, Vincent arrived at my studio. I was working on a new fragrance, blending generous amounts of citrus, white flowers, and the scent of a gentle breeze. "What are you working on?" He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin lightly on my shoulder. "I'm working on a new creation." I picked up a scent strip nearby and held it to his nose. "Take a sniff?" He closed his eyes, smiled after a moment. "It's bright, a joyful scent. Like the first ray of sunshine after rain." He asked, "What's it called?" I turned to face him, looking into his eyes, and said earnestly, "It's called US. Our story isn't a soliloquy that needs saving, nor an accomplice of mutual exploitation. It's brand new, radiant, a genesis that belongs solely to the two of us."